Welcome to Better Health Guy Blogcasts, empowering your better health. And now, here's Scott, your Better Health Guy. The content of this show is for informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any illness or medical condition. Nothing in today's discussion is meant to serve as medical advice or as information to facilitate self-treatment. As always, please discuss any potential health-related decisions with your own personal medical authority.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 219 of the Better Health Guy blogcast series. Today's guest is Connie Zack, and the topic of the show is Detox, Heal, Thrive, the Power of Sauna Therapy. Connie Zack, co-founder of Sunlighten, the world leader in infrared sauna and light therapy, was inspired by her brother's health transformation through infrared sauna use. She and her husband, Aaron, left successful pharmaceutical careers to create Sunlighten 25 years ago, revolutionizing the infrared sauna industry with research-backed innovations and global education on its benefits. A trailblazer in light therapy, Connie's passion for holistic health drives her commitment to nutrition, exercise, mindfulness, and infrared therapy, sharing light, hope, and expertise on how infrared impacts a healthy lifespan. And now my interview with Connie Zack. Today, we have a trailblazer of more than 2 decades and a ray of light, no pun intended, in the realm of sauna therapy, to talk with us about how sauna might support those of us dealing with complex chronic illnesses and those looking to optimize our health. It's also interesting that my very first episode of the podcast was also related to Sunlighten. That was actually before I even knew there was going to be a podcast. And so here we are now more than 200 episodes later. So kind of a full circle moment. Thanks so much for being here, Connie.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's talk a little bit first about your personal story, how you became interested in sauna therapy more than 2 decades ago. What was it that drove and now drives your passion for the work that you do to help others today?
Yeah, happy to share that. So long time ago, my brother was really chronically ill and he was young, and it was devastating to our family to watch him go through this illness. And it was ultimately his dentist who he was seeing for trying to change his fillings because he had mercury fillings. And his dentist said, Jason, I think this is what's causing all of your fatigue and all of your sickness and everything that you're experiencing. I think this mercury is getting into your body and it's leading to, all the conditions that he was experiencing. And he said, I have read about some interesting science about a technology called infrared, and that it may help to support detoxification of, hard to elements such as mercury. And so my brother first started with a blanket that had infrared fibers in it, and that didn't do anything. And so then he bought an infrared sauna, and it changed his life slowly but surely. And I was watching him transform his body naturally and safely, in the comfort of his own home. And I had a light bulb moment where, because I was at P&G, I was at Procter & Gamble on the pharmaceutical side of the business, and I was passionate, still am, to help people, live healthier lives and to make a difference in this world. And when I saw that my brother did this without medicine in the comfort of his own home, and, went from being on his deathbed and physically looked different to, being able to be revitalized and be able to go for runs and, completely changed his life. I thought, maybe this is, maybe I should investigate this infrared technology. And I started doing some research, and I found a lot of great research had already been done 25 years ago. It just wasn't available in the United States. Nobody knew anything about it. Nobody was talking about it. And so I left P&G eventually, and Aaron, who's at the time he wasn't, but he is my husband and business partner, he did the same thing. He was also at P&G. And so we both left our corporate jobs and decided to, create Sunlighten. And, as far as what drives me to do what I do still today is the fact that I really want to help people live their healthiest life possible. Ultimately, what gets me up in the morning is to be able to help people feel better and do more of what they love to do and live their fullest life as a result of the products that, I put into market, as well as the information that I can share that will, empower them to, live a great life. And I just feel like it's important that I feel responsible to share information if I know things that may be able to make people feel better than they do today.
It's hard for me to even remember an era when we didn't have access to infrared saunas. And so my own healing journey now has been more than 25 years. And so I guess we could separate it into the pre-Connie and post-Connie era if we're thinking about having these tools. I think at one time you guys actually were called Sunlight saunas, if I remember correctly.
Good memory. Yes, we were. Yeah, it's a long time ago. Yeah, we changed that after Oprah.
So what are some of the conditions where you commonly see people responding really well to sauna therapy? Are there some where maybe we don't see the needle moving as much? Are there certain conditions where maybe sauna could potentially be problematic, or we may not want to use sauna? What are some of the communities that are most drawn to using your products with the greatest success?
So as far as the communities, we'll start there. As far as, where are people having success? Definitely in that toxic burden area. So people, who have, for example, with mold toxicity or with heavy metal toxicity or, any types of being exposed, environmental toxicity. I mean, there's so many types of toxic burdens. And that definitely is like probably the biggest community. Another one that's the longest standing one, which is what inspired my research, and one of the reasons that I left my corporate job is because of the heart disease and any type of condition connected to creating a healthy heart. Infrared has had significant impact, and I'm very, very passionate about that aspect. As far as some more simple ones, sleep, and not that sleep is simple, because people who struggle with sleep would not not agree with that. But skin purification, weight loss, the whole aspect of mental health. We could spend time talking about that. That's really important. Anxiety and depression and just that whole arena. Infrared is been known to help. We have a lot of athletes today that use it for muscle recovery, decreasing inflammation. Probably one of my favorites as a working mom is increased energy. So people who are sluggish and chronic fatigue and, fibromyalgia. So those are some. I mean, there's a lot, and I'm sure they'll come up in our conversation, more communities that have had a lot of success. As far as people who may struggle, it's really important that people know, no matter where you are in your journey, it's really great to go low and slow and evaluate how your body's responding. That's really important. I mean, I just think back to my brother, and he started off at just a couple of minutes, and then, hydrate, and then, do it again the next day, and just kept working up. It took him a long time to get to that state of being so sick, right? So it was going to take a while for him to get rid of everything that was causing the toxic burden.
So talk to us about the difference between classical steam versus dry saunas, where we think about the rocks or coals, and how that compares to infrared sauna, where one's more heating from the outside in, one from the inside out. And then what is the temperature that we're thinking about in each of these different types of sauna modalities? Is there one that's better from a health perspective? If we're thinking about infrared, are we missing something that we might get with the more classical approaches? How should we think about these different options?
Great question. So let's start with traditional saunas. Those are heated by it's a different type of heat mechanism. So you're hot because the air is hot, and it's a much hotter temperature. And temperature matters a lot more in a traditional sauna. So generally speaking, they're around 170 and go, all the way up. And you can have the rocks. When I say traditional, I actually bucket all of the non-infrared saunas. So there's rocks, there's steam, there's coal, there's lots of different ways to deliver hot air. And sometimes it's dry air and sometimes it's moist air, but it's still hot air. And that's my point. Infrared, I refer, Scott, to infrared as energy medicine, because infrared is an energy. It's a form of energy. And the way it works with the body is it bypasses the air and goes directly into our body. And depending on which part of the infrared spectrum, something that's unique about infrared is it's a spectrum within a spectrum. So it's a spectrum of heat and light that comes from the sun's spectrum of light. And depending on which part of the spectrum you're receiving, it's either felt by heat or it's felt by light. And each one of those has special, powerful, magical properties that really literally can transform your body.
So let's dig in a bit then to that spectrum when we're thinking about red and infrared, and then within infrared, thinking about far and mid and near. If I remember correctly, your earlier sauna units were far infrared, and over the years, things have evolved to add some of these other wavelengths in. So can we see these with the naked eye? What does each of them do in terms of how they best support the body? How deeply does each of them go into the body? And then do we want a mix to really optimize our health? Wondering if you can talk us through some of the health benefits and the actions of each of those four types and why they're so important in the products that you design.
Yeah, another just powerful question. And this is one we could spend so long on. So I'm going to go a little bit slower on this because it's really, really important that people understand. I hear the term infrared sauna in that type of language. And to me, that leads somebody to think that it's all inclusive. And most infrared saunas on the market do not have, in fact, Sunlighten has the only one, say it a different way, it's easier to say that, has the only sauna that has far, mid, near, and red. So you really, people should talk in the language of this is a far infrared sauna, this is a far, has far infrared, mid infrared, this is a near infrared. They should label which part of the spectrum in order to be clear. So as far as, we'll start with far, because it's so wonderful talking to you because we've known each other for so long. And I remember having conversations about Lyme and just a long, long time ago. And so it's great that you've seen the evolution of our company and even know the fact that we started with far infrared. So far infrared is the foundation of the four wavelengths. And the reason I call it the foundation is because while all of them have significant impact on the body in different ways, which we can talk about, far infrared really helps the most with all of our systems. It is really the foundation of leading a longevity, life that's longer and having as long life as possible. And the reason for that is because it's absorbed into your water molecules. This is energy that's absorbed, and it works with your water and your mitochondria to completely change really everything in your body. It sets off this biochemical cascade that alters every single system in a positive way. So this energy transfer is received, and you start to get this increase in core temperature. And let me back up for a second because I want to make sure people are clear on how you feel this, and you feel it by heat. So it's light energy that you feel by heat. And your body, the air is not really that hot, but your body temperature starts to increase. So you start to get this increase in core temperature, and you start to see, my favorite thing is this whole flow aspect. And that's one thing. So you remember anything about this podcast, infrared means activation and it means flow, which is so important on our bodies. It's important to have our bodies having more blood flow, more oxygen flow, more like helping with your blood vessels, just helping everything move inside your body is really important to live a long, healthy life and to feel great. So that's far infrared. So it's really hero is, as we talked about, detoxification, heart healthy, all of the heart related, conditions. It helps with your skin purification from the inside out. And so those are some of the areas. Mid-infrared, you also feel by heat. Mid-infrared is absorbed not as deeply into the body. So it's really claim where it's special is in the joints and tissues. So it's excellent for muscle recovery. It also works synergistically with for reducing inflammation, for helping to burn calories, for helping to aid in detoxification. So it helps far along in those. So it's really like an adjunctive, partner, a buddy to far, where far is the foundation. So then you move over to near infrared. Near infrared, we brought to the market 2010, right after we were on Oprah. So that was 2009. So 2010, it was with Impulse, which is a sauna that's behind me, was introduced. And near infrared is delivered by light energy, by LEDs. You cannot see near infrared at all. So it is invisible. And then red light is also received by LEDs. So you have two that are available to feel by heat, and you have two parts of the infrared spectrum that you feel that's delivered by light. These two penetrate your skin. So you have energy that's absorbed by heat, and you have light that's penetrating directly into your skin. And near infrared goes deeper. Red doesn't go as deep. They work wonderful on activating your mitochondria. They work wonderful at reducing inflammation. They are amazing at all things benefiting the skin, which we can talk more in depth. But those two are non-heat related. So people sometimes get confused. And that's why when somebody says an infrared sauna, I'm like, well, which part of the infrared spectrum are we talking? And is it far, mid, near, or red? So that's kind of a quick overview. We can always dive deeper into any of the areas that you want.
So far infrared, mid infrared, we're going to feel that heat. Near infrared and red light, we're not going to feel the heat. And the only one we're going to visibly see with our eyes is the red. All of the other three infrareds, we're not going to visibly see any of those, correct?
That's exactly correct.
Beautiful. So one of the things that I had not heard, and a couple of listeners brought this up as I was preparing for this conversation, was this kind of conflicting opinion about using near infrared in the same environment or sauna with other wavelengths like far infrared. So I'm wondering if that's something you've heard about, if you can kind of clarify that controversy for us. Is there any concern about being exposed to multiple types of infrared at the same time? Is that beneficial? Is there any potential detriment? What is that controversy?
Yeah, so that's not a question that somebody has asked me personally. However, I'm happy to address and to clarify that having all of the wavelengths together is optimal. That is the optimal way to experience an infrared sauna, is going inside, turning it on, and letting the light and heat heal you and transform your body in many different ways. And I can't, for me personally, I mean, I've used them all over the years, and I can talk about all the different types of products that Sunlighten has made and why we made them, because everything has been intentional and it's all based on science. For me, I love being able to have what I call like the whole body complete longevity hack of Impulse, because you're literally hacking everything with far infrared, mid infrared, near infrared, and red light. You can't get more in one little environment than with having those four wavelengths. So I highly encourage somebody. It's optimal, and I understand. Believe me, I understand, because we created this business in the basement of our home, mortgaged everything we had. I mean, we were beyond broke. We were in debt. So I understand being in a situation where you can't, like the impulse is out of the league. So you can start in different places, which we can also talk about. So that can be aspirational, but if you're talking about what's ideal, let's shoot for the stars. That is ideal. It's also, I'm sure you're like this way too, Scott. I'm a huge efficiency fan. I mean, I just, I like to do more with less, like, just however I can maximize. And having all four wavelengths in the same place is the most efficient way to heal your body safely, naturally, in the comfort of your own home.
So you've mentioned longevity. So how much of an impact does sauna therapy have on all-cause mortality? Are there any studies that show the impact on health and mortality? I've heard some suggest that depending on the number of sessions per week and the duration, that we can reduce all-cause mortality by as much as 40% or more, which seemed incredible for any single intervention that I could possibly think of. So what have you found in terms of all-cause mortality reduction?
Yes, I have asked the experts. So there was the JAMA study that you're referencing that has that 40% reduction. And so I've asked, we have a medical advisory board, and I've asked a lot of our physicians that I work with how, because the JAMA study was done with traditional saunas. And their explanation is that infrared would deliver the same results, provided obviously you have the consistency without the intensity of having to have it so hot. So the heat, the high level of heat, is not an indicator of what's causing, the healthiness. It's actually just the consistent use of heat. And because infrared is absorbed into the body at a lower temperature, that it would deliver the same results. I will say that there's a separate study that there's extensive data. If anybody wants to Google WAON, WAON, WAON therapy, it stands for soothing warmth therapy. It's 15 minutes of infrared and then followed by being with a warm blanket. So just to keep the infrared energy inside your body. The studies with WAON therapy is absolutely mind-blowing. How just the positive impact when you talk about longevity and you talk about just living a healthy life and being able to do more, that those studies show exactly that. One of the studies with WAON showed a 50% reduction in hospitalization and death to those that were using infrared versus those that weren't. So there's plenty of research out there. There's research about helping with exercise, being able to exercise longer, being able to walk faster, after using infrared.
So if we're thinking about optimizing the benefits of sauna therapy, and from here on, we're primarily talking about infrared sauna, what should the duration of a session be? I've heard some of my mentors suggest that from a detox perspective, that we get the majority of the toxicant removal benefit or detox benefit within 5 to 10 minutes after we start sweating. I've heard other people say you need to do a full hour. So what duration, frequency, and temperature are considered optimal to get the full benefit without overdoing it when we're talking about infrared sauna?
So I'm going to address temperature first, because that's my favorite question, because this is the aspect that causes the greatest confusion. So with infrared, and this is really important to those of you who are listening, temperature is not an indicator of success and should not be something that you pay attention to, because temperature is like the thermometer, right? And that's what's important for traditional. You need to measure the temperature in a traditional sauna. You need to measure the temperature in your home. You need to measure the temperature in places that it matters, because you need to know whether you're going to turn it up or turn it down. In infrared, it doesn't matter. It's energy medicine. So think about it as like a light bulb where you turn it on and it's on. It does not matter. Like there's not other parts of that turning it on. It could be like a dimmer, and as you stay in there, you're going to feel hotter and hotter because you're getting more and more energy absorbed, and it's raising your core temperature. But as far as measuring success and as far as knowing when to get in and as far as the ideal temperature, it really doesn't matter. So that's really important. So that's the most important, really, probably thing that people can hear, because when you start to use your sauna, the best thing you can do is turn it on and get in. And especially if you have an impulse, when you turn it on, you'll see the red lights come on, right? And then we have a blue light indicator for the near infrared, so you can tell when it's on. And so those are immediately, on and being transferred. And it's the same for the mid and the far. So as far as duration is one of those, it really depends on how much time you have. So in an ideal, we'll start again shooting for the stars. In an ideal place, 40 minutes is a great amount of time. And you definitely were going to get, all the benefits. If we go back to Way On, right? Like that study was only 15 minutes. So, and we know that the significant impact that infrared had on the body. I am a huge believer that 15 minutes is better than not doing it. My mantra is consistency beats intensity every day of the week. I would rather see somebody be consistent, do it between 3 to 4. If you can do 5, you're a superstar, rock star in my world. 3 to 4 is what I personally shoot for times a week. And I shoot for between 15 minutes and 40. So that's my personal range. Also depending on what's going on in your body. If you are, have Lyme or mold or heavy metals, you're really struggling and you just overall do not feel great, then you don't want to start at 40. You want to start low and slow and work your way up and let your body, because your body's probably not had this concentrated amount of infrared. That's something that's unique about Sunlighten is our infrared delivery system is concentrated and patented. You can't get more far infrared anyplace else because we've patented our delivery. And so you're getting, it's like the multivitamin that is most readily absorbed into your body. That's what you want to think about. Like, so there's you can take vitamin C from some supplier, or vitamin C from another supplier. And depending on the delivery mechanism, 100% is absorbed or it's not, right? Like it just depends on the quality of the supplement.
So given that the listener community hearing us today is primarily complex chronic illness, Lyme, mold, I've always had some caution with sauna therapy, meaning if someone is still early in their recovery, and we're going to talk through several of these scenarios, that we should be cautious. Mm-hmm. I'm not one of those people that thinks that it's good to just push through if something's making us feel worse. But wondering if somebody's starting out doing sauna therapy, how do we differentiate between symptoms or things that we observe that are maybe hormetic, meaning they stress the body but ultimately are beneficial, versus things that are maybe telling us that we're overdoing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the number one rule, and I completely agree with you. So just want to validate that's our view. I mean, I just always go back whenever I hear that, I go back to thinking of my brother he was so sick. And so he had to start so slow. So as far as indicators, you should be able to, notice a difference. And so just pay attention. My greatest advice is listen to your body, pay attention to how you feel. And that's really the indicator. As I said, temperature is not an indicator of success. How you feel is. You should be able to, you start slow. And what's great about our sauna is you can just get in, turn it on and get in, and you will notice how your body is receiving the energy. You will notice how you feel. And I agree, don't push through. Like if all of a sudden you feel dizzy or you feel, nauseous, or you just feel like so fatigued, that's an indicator that, get out, drink a lot of water, go back to your routine, and then try it again in another day.
So we know in sauna therapy that many things come out in the sweat, and we'll
Yeah.
talk more about that. But we also know, and I think people sometimes don't think about the fact that infrared can penetrate into the body, and we can thus mobilize toxins in the body itself that then have to be processed by our detoxification and drainage systems after the session is over. So if we're thinking liver, kidneys, lymphatics, the extracellular matrix, the gut, the skin, the lungs, how important is it to support detoxification, to have open drainage pathways when we're thinking about things from the lens of toxins that could be mobilized inside the body? And wondering, building on that, do you suggest that people take binders to catch some of what's mobilized in the body during a session? And if so, how would we time the binder compared to the sauna?
Yeah, so 100%, I would want somebody who is really struggling. You're going to get I'm so glad you brought that up. You're going to get so much benefit from the energy helping to mobilize everything. And again, starting that flow process, I kind of just visually think about inside of just like inward motility, or just this wonderful vibration and transfer of cells, and just this, supercharging infrared, supercharging your cells. That starts to happen right away. So, and then everything starts to, I said, there's this cascade of events that start to impact the different organs that you mentioned, the liver and the brain and the kidneys. And so then you're going to have, after the session, the chance to excrete the toxins that were just mobilized. And so you don't need at the beginning, I would never, ever push through anything. So I would always stop, but you don't need to be in there for a long period of time to get those benefits. So that's really, really important. And glad you brought that up. And as far as binders, there's a lot of wellness experts that use our saunas that are big, huge proponents of binders. I am not an expert on timing of binders with the sauna. It's not something that I personally use, but I do know for sure, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, I've talked to so many people, and they are huge, there you go, huge advocates of, and I would think just intuitively, you would want it, before you take your sauna session, but I am not an expert.
So if we're thinking then about more sensitive patients, maybe they have mast cell activation syndrome,
Yes.
Maybe they have multiple chemical sensitivity. Many are sensitive to foods, to light, to sound, to EMFs, which we'll talk more about later, and potentially mobilizing heavy metals and other things in the body can trigger mast cells in some scenarios, can lead to some dysregulation of the immune system, potentially some inflammation. So should people be at a certain level of their recovery before they even think about sauna? Or is the approach to just start slow and low and not push beyond what the ultra-sensitive patient might be able to tolerate?
Yes. So, gosh, you were just bringing back so many memories of when we first started the company. And because the majority of people way back then in the basement were people that you just described, because those were the individuals that were on a hunt and they were searching for a solution. And so we helped so many people, back then and over the first 10 years of Sunlighten, because very quickly into the beginning of our company, we learned about that, how to deliver the most amount of infrared into the body. And that's really the secret sauce behind Sunlighten. And the reason I bring that up with this particular audience is because we're filtering out that hot air completely. I mean, it's 99%. So you can't get 100. So you're getting 99% absorption. And so I've always pictured kind of a funnel. We're figuring out how to funnel just the healing part of the infrared. So that hot air that a lot of times triggers people and has negative reactions on the body, is being filtered out. And I have heard countless stories from individuals who tried other infrared saunas, who have these sort of masked, cell, and they have said that makes them feel worse, and it's so like they can't use it. It wasn't until they discovered Sunlighten, because of our technology, and our technology is different than other types of infrared technology because of our patent, that it filters everything out. And so they're just getting the healing part, and they're able to tolerate it really, really well. In fact, it's like being game changers on their bodies.
So when you say it's filtering out the heat, how hot does it get inside the sauna during a session?
Yeah, so it's ranges between 110, 130, depending on which sauna. I mean, the Solo, which is a light L model, it can get up there closer to 140, 150 if you choose the higher settings. But that for these conditions, I would never in a million years, want you to probably ever choose that, because you're starting to get, this really high levels of heat. We know because we see the temperature, and that's not what the experience is all about.
One of the things that I've also observed over the years is if people have adrenal dysregulation, their body's under stress from so many different factors that sometimes they may not respond as well to more aggressive sauna therapy. Maybe they can't tolerate the heat. Maybe their body just can't deal with the stress of the detoxification itself. So I'm wondering, do you find that there are some people that need to support their adrenals before they better tolerate or can increase their use of the sauna? And what are your thoughts around people who are more adrenally exhausted in terms of when sauna therapy might be an optimal tool in their chronic illness recovery timeline?
We have found that it's ideal to go ahead and get started. And the key is the, hydration aspect, and to, go low and slow and, monitor your progress. But there are so many underlying conditions that infrared energy can assist with on the body that can help people in that situation, that it would be smarter to go ahead and let the energy, let the light and the heat start to heal you. And then that's going to be your tool, your foundational tool that's going to go along the way as you start to feel better.
No, I like this. And you're even shifting my thought process a bit in terms of starting slow and low, even earlier in the recovery process. Many people early on cannot sweat, which is another challenge for using sauna. So I tend to think of that as either lymphatic system congestion. It could be a hydration issue, which we'll talk about. So let's dig into some of those. Yeah. Should we potentially do some dry skin brushing to support the lymphatics and open the pores before we get into the sauna if we do have some inability to sweat? Should we maybe use a rebounder? Should we hydrate before, maybe even during and after the sauna, to support our body's ability to sweat? And if we should hydrate, are we better to use warm water or cold water?
Yeah, all great questions. And again, brings back so many memories of people who I used to talk to who couldn't sweat. And they would just be like, Connie, I don't know what to do, and we helped them. And so how we did that is that dry brushing is an excellent choice. Any type of activity that's going to, try and help get the lymphatic system going or helping get the flow going, in the body is great before you get in the sauna. And then also hydration that was the number one thing we found out of everything over the years, is so many people are dehydrated and more dehydrated than they realize. Not just dehydrated as, just like have a little bit of water. I mean, really significantly dehydrated. And it's really hard on your body to be able to sweat if you're not properly hydrated. And so we found that if they would do before, during, and then tons post, that was really a great solution for that category of people who were suffering, that not able to sweat. But I love your idea of dry brushing. I mean, I think that's an excellent, easy solution to do as well. But I always told people, I said, bring your, glass of water inside your sauna and, drink it while you're in there to support your body and to help your body. And eventually they're going to be able to, they may not sweat as profusely as, somebody, different situation, but generally speaking, most people were able to, have some sweat beads, over time. The thing also that I want to mention, because I remember having these conversations, they were concerned that if they didn't sweat, they weren't going to get the healing and the benefits, especially for detoxification. And that's just not true. So because, as we talked about earlier, the way that the infrared energy can impact the body and start to mobilize everything, and then the body starts to remove it, that's important. And you don't have to sweat in order to have that happen.
And if I remember correctly, since we are heating more from the inside out with infrared, that your recommendation is that when you're drinking water, to be drinking warm water and not cold water when we're doing the sauna itself. And then what about food? Should people not eat a lot before they go do a sauna? What is the recommendation?
As far as food, that's a great question. We don't really, most people that have a Sunlighten, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of people that are optimizing, right? Like that are just like, they're really optimizing their life. They're building this whole, wellness plan. They also do, and I don't know how you feel about intermittent fasting, but, they would typically do intermittent fasting. And so they find that when they do their sauna, they'll do it in the morning during that part. So that's typically, I can speak from my personal, use and my personal journey. I always do warm, if not almost hot. Water for sure. And I always do it in the morning and before a meal, I've never, I don't think in all these years, I'm not sure I've ever gone into my sauna right after eating.
So when we're thinking then about water and hydration, do you recommend that people add electrolytes or trace minerals when they're doing sauna so that they're not getting depleted by whatever's coming out in the sweat? Is that even something we need to think about, the potential depletion of electrolytes or minerals? And what are some of the things that we might then want to replete in the body that could be lost during sauna therapy?
Yes, absolutely. You absolutely need to think about it. It's so important. Remember that this is a powerful medicine, we'll call it. This is a powerful tool, longevity tool, the infrared sauna, that is changing the way your cells communicate, is changing the flow of your cells, is changing the flow of your body. It's mobilizing, and all of that activity can lead to getting rid of stuff that you don't want to get rid of. So you want to make sure that you are replenishing the important, parts of your, your body. So for example, sodium, is something that you want to make sure you add an electrolyte, magnesium, potassium. You want to make sure. So monitoring that, picking or you can make your own version with like some coconut water and some sea salt, and put in different types of things in there and concoction. But definitely paying attention to it is really, really important.
And I think sometimes when we have the electrolytes or the sea salt or the trace minerals, that then can help to further hydrate us at a more cellular level, where otherwise a lot of people with Lyme and mold illness that have low antidiuretic hormone tend to drink all day, pee it out, and are still dehydrated. So it sounds like adding some of these things to the water has the potential to increase our ability to retain the water, which then can support our ability to sweat.
Exactly. Perfectly said.
Many people with complex chronic illnesses have some aspect of limbic system impairment, of vagus nerve dysregulation, of autonomic nervous system hypervigilance. And I often think of the autonomic nervous system dysregulation as another reason why some people are not able to sweat. That's controlled by, in part, the autonomic nervous system. So do you find that there's benefit to doing things that are going to calm the nervous system in preparation for detoxification? And can sauna itself assist in supporting our parasympathetic nervous system as a foundational requirement for healing? In other words, can sauna help us to move out of fight, flight, or freeze and more into a rest, digest, detoxify, and heal state?
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite benefits. And it makes me think of Leanne Rimes. She shares her story about how she, over the years, ever since she's been 14, she's been in that, that freeze form, and has, as a result, experienced high levels of anxiety and just some, serious depression, and has had to figure out ways to go through that and to live with it. And then comes the time where her cycle starts to changing. She starts to get, into perimenopause, and hormones are changing and everything. And it wasn't until her doctor recommended a Sunlighten sauna. And she always shares that she literally she goes in there and she's, her head is in that state. And as soon as she gets in, she just completely it changes her breath, it changes her brain, it changes her whole mood. And she says she can go in there when everything is about to crash, and she comes out completely, relaxed and refreshed, and like she can conquer anything. She calls it her happiness in a box.
I mean, I like that idea too of having kind of the intention of your sauna kind of being your safe space that you can just step away from the stress of the world. In my mind, environmental toxicity plays a really foundational role in many chronic complex conditions. And I honestly think that most health conditions that we have today would not even exist if we didn't have such exposure to environmental toxicants. So from that perspective, has the sweat or maybe even the urine been tested in the context of infrared sauna therapy to see what's actually coming out? Are we seeing metals? Are we seeing chemicals? Are we seeing pesticides like glyphosate? Are we seeing mycotoxins? What are the primary things that you're seeing in the sweat, also potentially in the urine? I know you've talked before about how we're exposed to as many as 700,000 chemicals per day, which, if I got that right, still sounds shocking even to me. And wondering how broad infrared sauna's ability is to remove these health negating materials from our systems.
Yeah, no, that's correct. Everything that you said, and so well stated. And the technology of infrared is one of the greatest solutions to helping both you get rid of the toxins as well as preparing the body for things that are outside your control, right? Like, we can't control when we go outside the fact that we are exposed to so many chemicals. We can't control when we go into a store. There's so many places that we go into that we can't control what is in the air that we're breathing. And what we can control is what we do at home, in the comfort of our home. And there have been studies. In fact, there's a study that's called the blood, urine, sweat study, the BUS study. And it was actually done by an environmental physician who wanted women to be healthy as they prepared for pregnancy. So it's a great backstory. And what we found in that study was that sweat mattered, meaning that there was tests done on the participants with blood and urine, and the ones that did not have any mercury in their blood, 15% had none in their blood, but 100% of that 15% had it in their sweat. So meaning that sweat definitely, it's not it's not the only way, right, to detoxify, but it definitely helps to mobilize and to get rid of things that are really heavy and hard to get rid of, such as mercury. I mean, we know for sure that it's just such a hard thing to get out of the body once it gets in there. And other products that were removed, toxicants that were removed from the body, were mercury, lead, cadmium, aluminum. I know we did a study with UMKC back 2005, and we found arsenic that we removed was with the result of people using our Sunlighten solo. So those are some of the toxicants that were reported to be removed. We, over the years, this is kind of a side story, just brings me back up, but people used to send us, this is before anybody would even think of measuring their sweat, right? But so they would send us their blood work after using our sauna. It was so sweet and special and precious. I used to keep everybody's, I used to have this file of everybody's blood work from our customers. I would send it. But my point is they would send us like pre-sauna and post-sauna. And some of the heavy metals and some like that was so powerful. People that would test the mercury just completely changed, and from being high to being gone. It's crazy.
So this day and age, we have tools like the Vibrant Total Tox or the Mosaic Tox Detect that are looking at chemicals, pesticides, metals, all kinds of things. Are you seeing before and after sauna therapy with some of these newer, broader environmental toxicant tests?
So we haven't done, and you just put a great idea in my head. So thank you for that. We haven't done a lot of that type of partnering, where we're starting to partner with more of those types of companies, which I'm super excited about, some of the biomarker companies. But that's an opportunity, is to test pre and post.
A lot of our listeners and my own health journey included a significant mold and mycotoxin component. One of the things that I've seen bright practitioners do over the past many years is use sauna prior to the collection of the urine for a urine mycotoxin test, so that we minimize false negatives and help move as much of that mycotoxin burden out of the cells, ultimately into the urine and out of the body. So wondering what you see and hear from people dealing with mold or mycotoxin illness, and how infrared sauna comes into that conversation.
Yeah, so that's a great idea. So I've never heard that specific example, but I love that you shared that. When we started the company, mold, Lyme, kids with autism, I mean, we had like these groups, these communities that I just became so closely connected to, because our product was helping them. And I mean, they go from being debilitated because of mold toxicity and being so sensitive, right? Like so sensitive, like you couldn't even walk in a place and like, oh my God, there's mold in there. Like that's just amazing that, the bodies, get into this place where they're that sensitive, and we have to find ways and do things that we know help to remove those toxicants, and infrared is a way to do that, and to do it safely and and consistent, and just get your body back to the place where it's healthy, and give you more energy and give you the body that that you have in there somewhere. It's just it's stuck right now with all this exposure to things that you can't get out of your body. And we definitely have helped. We've helped not only just, regular people, but we've helped a lot of people in the wellness field today that came to us because they had mold or they had different conditions and they needed it fast, because they are the advisor, right? The thought leaders and the influencer and the person that's helping other people who are sick. And so we were able to get them back on their feet. The Solo is a great product for people that are going through this community that we're talking about with mold, because it's a lie down model and your head is out. And that's always the model that I would tell people that were in that situation. I'm like, just get the Solo that's far infrared and get in there, start slow. What's nice about the solo is there's different levels on it. They're already kind of pre-programmed. And so you can just like press a button and go in, and it's transformative for sure.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when we're in a home that has a mold issue, then we always have the challenge of what personal belongings can we bring or do we have to get rid of? And so having to deal with the bigger sauna versus, I think, if I remember correctly, the solo, for the most part, probably could be cleaned pretty well in that situation. So you wouldn't necessarily have to get rid of it when you were moving to a different space. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yes, that's correct.
So much of the conversation today around environmental toxicants is on forever chemicals like PFAS. There's a lot of conversation now on microplastics and nanoplastics and how we consume a credit card size amount of plastic every week. Do we know if infrared sauna has a role in helping to unburden the body from those types of toxicants?
Yeah, there's more research that needs to be done there. And I know that visual is I just like want to scream every time I hear that because it's so scary. And man, I am like such a glass girl and like I'm so sensitive to the whole plastics. So more research needs to be done to answer your question directly. However, I will say the way that you feel after you have a Sunlighten session, everybody says they feel lighter. And so while I don't know the answer and I don't have the data to support, your question for sure, but I do know that the energy and the levity and just the way that you feel when you're done, I think more is happening inside than we even know in a positive way. So I would encourage somebody to try it out, and you don't have to necessarily get one for your home. If you can go places and try them, make sure it's a Sunlighten so that you don't have that experience of the people with Marcella who said they went to a different brand and almost gave up on infrared. I'm so glad that they didn't.
So one of the things that I commonly hear is the importance of showering after doing a sauna session. So we don't want to reabsorb the things that were liberated, that came out in the sweat, that are still somewhat on our skin. So should we be showering immediately after? Should we use cold water to close the pores? And what if someone's doing it at a location where they can't shower, they have to drive home, and by then all the sweat has kind of dried up? Maybe they've reabsorb some of what they had excreted. Should we then be doing wet towel wiping before kind of heading home? What are your thoughts about the post-sauna process?
Yeah, post-sauna process, I would do exactly what you just said, is to, take a wet towel if you can't shower. If you can shower, then rinse off for sure. And warm water is fine to shower with. I mean, cool water, that's going to go and, provide a little bit more stress to the body, which is not a bad thing. It's a good thing, So if you want to go that direction, you can go that direction. So that's more of like a personal preference. And a lot of people really like to have that, keep the stressor because, you just had the stress inside the sauna, right? Like the infrared activates your heat shock proteins. It gives you the stressor that helps make your body stronger. And it's really great for the other proteins in your body. And then if you get out and shower and you shock your body again with the cold, that is also just a good way to keep the healing going.
We know that a lot of these toxins are fat soluble, that they tend to be in our adipose tissue. When you do a sauna, sometimes you can feel a little slimy or greasy. So is water enough, or should we be using something else to try to get that residue off of our skin?
Oh, that's a great question. And yeah, your sweat consistency, that was one of the first things I noticed when I was learning about this technology. I was like, gosh, like the viscosity and the texture of my sweat is different than if I go for a run. It's a completely different sweat. So I always, and I've worked with a lot of physicians over the years, and I haven't not had anybody, I haven't asked them that question, but that's something I am going to ask. But I've never had anybody tell me to, to have somebody rinse off with something other than just a regular shower.
So you mentioned heat shock proteins. That's a great segue. So what are they? When are they created? Is it temperature driven? Is it duration of sauna session driven? What is the temperature that maybe is required for us to create those heat shock proteins? And then what are the benefits of heat shock proteins when we're thinking about optimizing health?
Yeah. So heat shock proteins are protective molecules that the body makes in order to respond to some type of stress. Stress meaning that the temperature changes, your body is responding to that. And I call them, personal trainers for the cells. And I call them personal trainer for the cells because they help other proteins that are damaged, they help repair them, they protect your body, they improve the resilience in your body. It's the entire philosophy of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So this is you asked a question earlier that I loved so much. It's like, when is stress good and when is stress, bad? And this type of stress is really good for your body. It's making your body stronger. And, you don't need, the data definitely says that extreme is not needed. So you do not need high levels of heat, just a little bit. And that changes. It's the change, right? It's changing from being in a 70-degree environment, to like receiving this light and heat energy into the body, that the body's like, oh, wow, this is different. I'm altering myself and I'm stressed, but that stress is making me stronger.
Many of us are also taking pretty large supplement protocols. We talked about how circulation can increase when we're doing sauna therapy. So I'm just wondering if that increase in circulation, that increase in fluidity, as you talked about, maybe a decrease in stagnation, if that might also kind of synergize the other things that we're doing and taking, because they're better able then to get deeper into the body?
Wow. That's a great question, Scott. One, I don't know the answer to. I can theorize exactly what you just said, but I love the question and I love the thought process. I just don't know for sure. I don't have the data to support that it would do that. My goal for myself is always to take as few things as possible. So I know that it's not possible for most people listening, because they're having to, work on ways to supplement and to, help the body get healthier. So I'm going to have to say, I just don't know.
So let's talk now about some of the key markers of aging. What are they? How does sauna therapy help support healthy aging? And then wondering if you've done any before and after testing that showed reductions in biological age.
So the key markers of aging, Michael Hamlin is the one that Dr. Hamlin helped us identify how infrared can impact them. So we'll start with mitochondria. And so infrared, this is one that's really special because infrared, far infrared, as well as mid infrared, as well as near, and well as red, all of them activate the mitochondria and really help produce more ATP. So it's super, super important on your body. Your mitochondrial function is like one of the number one things as you age. If it starts to be dysfunctional, then it's going to definitely speed up the aging process. The next one would be cellular senescence. Those are just cells that die off, but they don't leave. We call them zombie cells. Infrared, what we call like the zombie slayer. I like to think of infrared in this category as the energy that removes the traffic jam. So all those cells are stuck and it gets rid of them. Inflammation is another hallmark of aging. Far infrared specifically activates a gene that controls inflammation in the body. So it's really important to have, that's why far infrared, that's another reason that far infrared is a foundational infrared wavelength. And then gut dysbiosis. So that's a hallmark of aging. And we know for sure that infrared can help with the gut microbiome. So it's going to help your gut be healthier. And then that there's that gut brain. I'm getting a little bit off tangent, but I'm so passionate right now about like the gut brain connection and how that your gut controls, your brain. And if you can have a healthy gut microbiome and you can invest in that part of your body, you're going to have better cognitive function. You're going to like boost, your brain cells. You're going to increase blood flow to your brain. You're going to reduce inflammation in the brain. So that's really, really important. And that can all happen with your gut health. And then stem cell vitality. And we know more and more, especially with red light and near infrared, they can really help repair your tissues and help your stem cells be healthier.
So a few follow-up questions then. This is really an exciting area to talk about. So do we know how much sauna impacts ATP production in the mitochondria? Is it increasing the energy currency within the mitochondria and thus within our bodies? And then building on that, many environmental toxicants negatively impact the mitochondria. And we can go as far as to say that there are DNA adducts where we see things like metals and mycotoxins that are actually adducted or attached to our mitochondria. So if we are unburdening the mitochondria of all of these environmental toxicants, isn't that then also going to lead to better mitochondrial functioning and more energy production?
So yes, and yes. Yes to everything that you asked. I mean, we know that infrared, and this is where we're going full circle. This is where, when I talked about the beginning, you asked about the parts of the infrared spectrum, and is it ideal or is it good to have near infrared and red light with far infrared? This is the perfect example of efficiency, because each part of the infrared spectrum impacts ATP production, and it increases cellular energy output. It helps the entire transport chain, work more effectively. And as far as percentage wise, I'm not sure we know the exact percentage, but this is why I'm finally understanding all of the feelings I've had over the years as far as my body, because I'm very, very, very aware and very in tune with my body and how I feel and what impacts it positively, negatively, et cetera. And one of the first things I noticed was the change in energy that I experienced. And now I'm understanding why we have that change, because I'm getting this light energy and this heat energy and this electrical energy that is activating my mitochondria. I mean, it's like literally what's charging them. This is why I always say infrared is supercharging for your cells. It literally supercharges your cells.
So let's talk then a little bit about autophagy or cellular cleanup. You talked about the concept of senescent cells or zombie cells, which persist in the body and really still are producing inflammatory mediators and negatively impacting our health. We're now sadly living in the era of COVID. The FLCCC, which is now the Independent Medical Alliance, I believe, they highlighted the benefits of fasting and intermittent fasting early on as a way to support autophagy to help clear out spike proteins. So wondering if there are ways that we know of to measure what someone's senescence burden is, and what have you seen in the era of COVID relative to spike proteins from the lens of sauna therapy and how people with long COVID might be responding to sauna therapy?
So I think that I haven't seen the data on cellular senescence to answer that question specifically. I know I've heard a lot of testimonials with long COVID with Sunlighten sauna. I know I've heard a lot of great stories. As far as data, we don't have any yet. The one thing I will say that when going back to cellular senescence is that people who frequently, consistently use infrared always report a reduction in brain fog. And we know that sometimes that cellular senescence can cause brain fog. And so those cellular cleanup, those cells that are just hanging around. And so I don't have a study and I don't have data, but I do know the positive impact when it comes to a clear mind. And as well as I talked about earlier, we do know that, that the infrared can help to boost BDNF, which helps to grow back brain cells. So that's getting a little bit off topic, but I was trying to stick to the data that I do know and have, versus the stuff I just don't know.
No, but that's amazing. BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor, when we're thinking about dementia and cognitive decline and Alzheimer's, like those are important things for us to be thinking about. The third of the 5 that you talked about was inflammation. So what kind of relief are people seeing in terms of inflammation? Is it more muscle pain, joint pain? Do we see both reduce?
All levels of pain, joint, deep, all body. Inflammation is one of the fastest and just most reported benefits with all the different wavelengths, far, mid, near, and red. And far is the one, just as a reminder, because this is really important, back to the foundation, far is the one that activates the gene inside your body to help control inflammation.
One of the things that I was a little surprised to read about was about the gut dysbiosis microbiome. So talk to us a little bit about the mechanisms through which sauna or infrared sauna therapy might help gut dysfunction. What are the indicators of gut health that we think improve with sauna therapy?
Yeah, so how it helps is reducing inflammation and increase in circulation and detoxifying the body. And so you're going to feel better. And then that impact of feeling better is going to help the overall mood and enhance the mood. We also know that red light and near infrared penetrate and actually help the gut microbiome. So that's really powerful. Because if your gut is happy, generally speaking, the rest of your body follows.
Lastly, you talked about sauna and its potential to revitalize stem cells, which are really key for regenerating or restoring as we age. People pay tremendous amounts of money for stem cell therapy. So talk to us a little bit about how this works with sauna. Is it increasing the number of stem cells that the body is producing? Is it impacting the release of stem cells from the bone marrow? And do we know if there's other restorative or regenerative, either hormones or growth factors that also increase in the body when we're using sauna therapy?
Yeah, so all of the above. I mean, it really just overall not only helps to produce more, but also helps to repair and tissues and regenerate. So overall stem cell vitality is how I like to frame it.
So coming back to brain health, you talked about BDNF. We know Alzheimer's disease is a fear for many. Many have cognitive decline, dementia. You mentioned even brain fog. I think those can all have a toxicity component, an infection component, a mitochondrial component, so many factors that we've already talked about. So what do you see long-term with people that are using sauna in terms of their ability to improve or maintain their cognitive health over time?
People are happier and have better moods and have clearer minds. And as a result, have clearer, more creative thoughts and want to get back in their sauna because they notice such a significant difference and such a mood change, which is, coming from the brain. And that mood just helps the entire body. When you think about when the brain is stressed, and you're not able to think clear, like it's really not good to make decisions when your brain is in that fight or flight state, right? And if you can get that into the parasympathetic state, which we know for sure the sauna can, then you can think clear and make better decisions and be happier.
I want to come back to the COVID conversation just for a moment. We know that endotheliitis, or inflammation of our blood vessels, is a real issue these days, maybe one of the biggest issues. We see more hypercoagulation. We see more people with clotting issues as well. So talk to us a little bit about sauna therapy and its impact on our endothelium, our blood vessels, our circulation, and maybe even potentially reducing the potential for clotting.
Yes, and this is one of the most studied areas. So if people want to do some more research on their own, you can, research, you can enter in infrared endothelial health and see the positive, powerful impact that infrared has on your blood vessels and on the increased flow. And I just heard Dr. Gundry talked about how he measures and he can measure blood vessel flexibility, and he knows that infrared, specifically the all 4 wavelengths, can increase your flexibility in your blood vessels, which is one of his indicators for as a factor to measure longevity is how flexible your blood vessels, and infrared can help.
So do we think about sauna therapy as an exercise mimetic or mimic? Can we truly passively burn calories in a meaningful way? And can sauna therapy be helpful as part of a well-planned weight maintenance program? And then building on that, what kind of cardiovascular exercise do we get in the sauna? Is it giving our cardiovascular system a passive workout? I know when I do sauna, I feel my heart rate kind of going and the circulation moving better. So talk to us a little bit about both the potential for sauna to support weight maintenance as well as the cardiovascular component.
Yes, cardiovascular is a huge benefit. It is an exercise mimetic for sure. Your heart rate increases, your blood flow increases, the oxygen starts to flow. And so you feel like you're working out, but you're just letting the light and energy heal you. We also have a weight loss program in Impulse Sauna. So in the Impulse Sauna, there's 6 different wellness programs that are preset. And so if you want a weight maintenance, if that's one of your goals, then I would choose the weight loss program when you get inside your sauna.
Many of our listeners are dealing with Lyme disease, with other bacteria like Bartonella, many viruses, parasites like Babesia and others, fungal colonization, yeast, even environmental exposures. Some people that have chronic infections feel tremendously better when they get something acute that triggers a fever response. In fact, sometimes all of their symptoms go away while they have this acute condition. So how might sauna help from a perspective of acting as kind of a hyperthermia effect? And then are there certain types of infections where sauna is known to be more effective in supporting the body than others?
So the sauna is so effective in these types of conditions because of that increase in core temperature and essentially creating a false fever. We know for sure in 30 minutes you can increase the core temperature up to 3 degrees. And so that doing that consistently, and again, it goes back to consistency. I can't stress that enough. So consistency is super, super important. And then while your body is fighting to cool itself down, I mean, that you're being able to make your body stronger and you're getting your body regulated. And it reminds me of way back in the day. I think when you and I met, we were working with Dr. Klinghardt and developing protocols, and they used, the Sunlighten sauna in their Lyme disease protocol.
Chronic infections are certainly an issue for many people, but supporting the immune system and modulating the immune system is equally important. It's not, from my perspective, not about killing something. Sometimes it is about getting the immune system to be more tolerant, to be more in integration with our microbiome. So wondering if sauna helps to support the immune system. Do we need to be concerned at all in people with autoimmune conditions or hypervigilant immune responses in terms of using sauna therapy? And is there any data to suggest that sauna therapy can slow immune senescence or slow thymic involution as we age?
I think the most important thing to mention here is we do know how much that infrared can help support our immune function for sure. Dr. Cole does a great talk on this about just how infrared energy makes the body stronger, and it activates the heat shock proteins that we talked about, which help to strengthen the body, help to rebuild the proteins. helps to increase circulation and helps to, encourage detox, all of which will help to make the immune system stronger.
If we think about depression or anxiety, which you mentioned earlier, I tend to think of those often as neuroinflammatory conditions and thinking about infections or toxins that drive neuroinflammation leading to depression or anxiety in some people. So, how often are we seeing sauna therapy being beneficial in that mental, emotional, depression, anxiety realm? Is it commonly helpful for people?
It's commonly helpful, and it's one of the areas that I'm most passionate about because it really, really helps people. If you can help boost people's mood, you can significantly change their life.
Sleep is critical to recovering from any chronic health condition or even avoiding one in the future. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about how sauna supports sleep, what you hear from users. Are you seeing reports of sleep improvement when we're measuring with things like an Aura ring? And do we see changes in either duration of REM sleep or deep sleep, or maybe even heart rate variability?
Yes, to all the above. That's a great question. And I just read an article yesterday from somebody who posted a doctor that studied or is a professor at Indiana University School of Medicine, and this doctor was talking about how that they kept hearing a lot about infrared, and they wanted to do their own research. And the number one thing that they said that they experienced was not only the experience during how great they felt, but that night's sleep was the best night's sleep that they had in a very long time. And so we get people sending us their Aura ring results. We get people sending us the Garmin results. We have a lot of athletes that said this is a game changer for them. We know for sure it helps put you back in the circadian rhythm and also helps control your hormones. So there's significant impact with sleep for sure.
Now, I want to come back to the water conversation or hydration conversation. Gerald Pollack has talked about EZ water, exclusion zone water, or gel like water. I've historically heard that we can create EZ water in the body with infrared. So, wondering if that in fact is true. And then, what are the benefits of creating more EZ water? Does infrared also potentially structure water?
So, as far as does infrared do exactly what you just said as far as changing the structure of the water? Yes, we know that for sure. We know that both infrared light and heat can, create easy water, and it's a great way. My visual of this is that if you could create a way to have additional energy and additional battery life in your body, so that you never powered off, so like your cell phone and different things. That's what this does. You're creating you're supercharging your energy so that you're extending your battery in your body.
In our last several minutes together, I want to talk more specifically about some of the Sunlighten products. So you have, as I understand, a few different lines at this point. You have the Impulse that you've mentioned a few times. You have the Amplify, also the Signature products as well. And then you mentioned the Solo. So I believe the Solo and Signature are far infrared. The Amplify, I believe, is far infrared and full infrared. And then the Impulse is the one that you mentioned that was really unique with the far infrared, mid, and near infrared, as well as the red. Are there any other key differences that we should know about those different products in your line?
No, you nailed it. It's exactly the way I would frame it.
And when we think about the Impulse, it's pretty cool. You mentioned some of these, but you have the different programs like detox, relaxation, anti-aging, cardiovascular, weight loss, and pain relief.
Yes, it changes the frequencies, it changes the intensities, and it changes the pulsation. So those are the different, and all of that is based on the scientific research. So each program you're going to feel a different experience.
And is it a different temperature based on the programs as well, or is it largely the same?
The temperature can completely vary. For example, the anti-aging program is primarily near, red, and far because the skin, Like we want to protect the skin as much as possible, and we want to purify it and detoxify it with the far infrared, and then we want to penetrate it with the red and the near and increase your collagen and your elastin. So we don't really need the mid infrared one, which creates a hotter experience. So that is going to be a completely different experience as far as it relates to temperature.
So in reaching out to my community to see what they were interested in learning about sauna and about your products, the biggest topic was EMF exposure. So many people in this community are EMF sensitive. We work very hard to reduce our exposure as much as possible. There's also some rationale that talks about EMFs blocking detoxification. And I've seen this myself with people that if you can just reduce their EMF exposure, they can start to detoxify inherently much better just from kind of getting out of a cellular sympathetic dominance. So people ask how much EMF your saunas have. I know you talk about this a lot. It's important to you, but I want to think about what exactly when Sunlighten says it's low EMF, are we talking about magnetic fields? Are we talking about electric fields? Are we talking about radio frequency? What is your design and testing process when we talk about EMFs? Because I've seen other products that claim to be low in EMFs, and building biologists would come out and do their testing and find exactly the opposite of what we expected. So what does low EMF mean in the Sunlighten context?
Yes. And so this is really important to us as well. And it always was since the beginning of our company. We have evolved, and I'm so proud to say that we have independently tested so that way, whatever I say on here, which is that EMF is virtually non-existent, I can back that up with an independent testing company. It had nothing to do with us except for come here to Kansas City and test our saunas.
And when they were doing that testing, were they looking at magnetic, electric, and radio frequency, or were they focused on one specific aspect of what we often just refer to as EMF?
They looked as extensive. They looked at everything.
So building on the EMF conversation for the more hypersensitive, and maybe what I'll do is reach out and put a link in the show notes that goes into more detail about the EMF piece that you mentioned with the third-party tester, because I know people are going to want more detail than I could even possibly offer and that we could talk about in this conversation. But thinking about more sensitive people, what about things like VOC exposure? Like when people first get their sauna, do they say, oh my God, like it smelled so bad? Or are there any chemicals or glues or varnishes or anything that people in the mast cell or multiple chemical sensitivity community might react to?
There aren't. And I mean, we grew up in the MCS category. So, I mean, it's not like we aren't aware. I mean, we're so sensitive to people's needs. And so we tailored everything, all of our materials. I don't go into all the details of everything that we use, but we're really strict about making sure that when you open up that box and you start to, put it together and you get in, that we are enabling and empower you to live your healthiest life.
You mentioned earlier that there really is no need to preheat the sauna to benefit from the infrared itself. But for people, I know oftentimes I like to preheat mine and it's kind of a manual process, but wondering, is there an ability to automatically start that preheating process when we're thinking of the impulse? Can that be scheduled, or is there a way to do it remotely so that everything's ready to go when you're ready to go?
Yes, you can absolutely do that.
When people are thinking about installing one of these systems in their home, is there a need for some special power? Can we run these on a normal outlet? Do we need to have an electrician put in a 240 outlet? How is that working?
It depends on the model, but I will say this rule of thumb that nothing that is true for everything except for probably the solo is you need to have a dedicated circuit, and that's the most important thing. After that, it just depends on which size you use, and then you will receive all the electrical specs, so you will know everything that you need to know.
And I know some of your systems also have light therapy or chromotherapy. I'm wondering if you can talk to us a little bit about that. And is there any aspect then of sound or acoustic therapy that's part of the Sunlighten systems?
We used to have acoustic therapy. It's one of my favorite parts of our sauna that's currently on hold, work in progress. So stay tuned for that. As far as chromotherapy, the colored light therapy, that is available in all of our saunas.
You talked a little bit about people that maybe don't have the space, or maybe in situations where we don't want to have something that's more permanent because they may be moving, those types of things. Having this solo, which if I understand correctly is kind of either laying down on the floor or putting it on a massage table and then pulling the dome over. You mentioned that your head is out. I know there's a lot of conversation these days about sauna blankets. I've tried some of those. I looked like a candy cane when I got done. The heat was not distributed well. I know I've spoken to other people that even had some minor burns from some of those systems. So I'm not so sure that that's an ideal option. Maybe they've evolved further, but wondering if you can just talk to us a little bit about some of the use cases or the people that are more drawn to using your solo option for something more portable.
Yeah, the solo is, I really strongly encourage people who are listening. I mean, it's such a great solution for anybody with MCS or anybody who has Lyme and mold, or, just really, really looking to, upgrade their health. It's easy, it's portable. There's 2 domes that are there. It's about 67 pounds all in, so 30 pounds ish, each dome. So it's not difficult to use, and it also comes with the chromotherapy, and I highly recommend it. It's really intense. I would, if you are going to go this route, I would start low for sure, because you're so close to the heaters. And the heaters, as a reminder, are the heat when it's the energy when it's transferred, it's absorbed into the cells, and so that like you're like literally immersed, and so it's very, very powerful and potent.
I'm definitely a huge fan of red light therapy and use a powerful red light therapy panel. So wondering, with the red light that we're getting in a sauna, how does that compare in terms of the power and intensity of maybe a standalone red light panel? And I know you all offer those as well.
Yes. So we have all of it. I personally, I have both. I have in my home, I have the standalone, and I also have obviously the sauna. And I mean, if you have a big, huge panel, you're going to have more power because it's a big, huge panel. However, the way red and near works, and I don't want to get too deep into this, but essentially it's a frequency of energy that you can only absorb so much, and then you're done. So I particularly like the red and the near inside my sauna, because I'm also being able to receive the heat at the same time.
How often do you see people having detoxification reactions or Herxheimer-like reactions in more sensitive people? And if someone does feel worse as they're kind of acclimating and hopefully starting low and slow, if they do feel worse after sauna, are there any rescue tools that you suggest for people to move beyond flares as quickly as possible?
We have not, ever since I remember that back 20 years ago, before we perfected our technology. But once we increased our emissivity, our absorption up to 99%, we have not had any of those types of experiences.
So let's, as we wrap up, then talk about contraindications for sauna therapy. What if someone has implanted metal orthopedic devices or dental implants or pacemakers, maybe pregnancy as well? Who should not be using sauna therapy?
Definitely pregnancy, and anybody who has metal, they should just consult with their physician. This is an area where we haven't had anything, but I might want to make sure that, if you have implants, talk to your physician first.
And what about breast implants from a perspective of heating them and them then potentially leaching out more toxins into the system? Is that a consideration?
That's something that we have asked many physicians about over the years, and we haven't had anybody that has had, any concerns. But because breast implants have changed so much over the years, from my understanding, and so we always want to go back to the physician.
A couple of listeners, they commented that they had issues doing sauna with their eyes, and they felt like their vision was blurry after sauna. They didn't notice this if they covered their eyes. One of them maybe was using aluminum foil, which I thought was an interesting solution. Are there any concerns around protecting the eyes? Do we need goggles? Do we need protective glasses? Or could it be, and this was more my thought from knowing when I do sauna, that just sweating and having then some of those toxins in the sweat potentially getting into the eyes might be a reason that people could experience that. So anything that we need to be careful about from the perspective of the eyes with infrared?
No, there's nothing to be careful about. I would support your theory as well.
So if people want to learn more about Sunlighten products, tell us how they can do that. And I know you're offering a special discount to the Better Health Guy community as well.
Yeah, so most important to the discount, which is up to $1,400 off, make sure you mention the Better Health Guy. That's the way it's going to unlock that code. And then you can just go to sunlighten.com. Or you can call us, 877-292-0020. You can do chat. We're going to meet you wherever you want to meet. You can put your cell phone in, or we can text you. However you want to have a consultation and however you want to be reached, we will reach you.
My last question is the same for every guest, and that is, what are some of the key things that you do on a daily basis in support of your own health?
I really focus so much on mindset and attitude and putting things into perspective. And so that's, I feel the mind, controls so much of our well-being. And so I want to make sure that I start my day with a beautiful healing mindset. And so that's one of the reasons I do my sauna in the morning, because it puts me in the right mindset and the right place so that I can, manage the rest of my day, because my day, as I plan it, never ends up the same way that I planned it in my head. It always takes detours. So I need to start off with just a really good attitude, with a smile and just the right perspective. And that's really the most important thing. The rest falls into place. I mean, I drink a lot of hot water with lemon, I take electrolytes, I eat, a highly nutritious, diet, I exercise. But the, non-negotiable is really taking time in my sauna and just having the right mental perspective.
Connie, this has been such a great conversation. I want to thank you for being so generous with your time, but also really want to thank you for living in your purpose and passion and creating these devices that we can use to not only detoxify, but to really support our vitality and move us in the direction of healing and really supporting our ability to thrive and show up in this world. So thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you for doing what you do, and thanks for keeping in doing it. It's just like so nice to see you again, and it's great the work that you're doing. I really believe in it.
To learn more about today's guest, visit sunlighten.com. That's sunlighten.com. Sunlighten.com, and don't forget to mention Better Health Guy to unlock discounted pricing on your very own Sunlighten sauna. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you're enjoying the podcast, please leave a positive rating or review, as doing so will help the show reach a broader audience. To support the show, visit betterhealthguy.com/donate. To get my newsletter, visit betterhealthguy.com/newsletters. To follow me on Facebook, Instagram, X, or TikTok, you can find me there as Better Health Guy. This and other episodes can be found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, and Odyssey.
Thanks for listening to this Better Health Guy blogcast with Scott, your Better Health Guy. To check out additional shows and learn more about Scott's personal journey to better health, please visit betterhealthguy.com.